In this episode, we're looking at connecting to the remote learner and how we do that. Today, I'm joined by Renee Fisher. Renee has been designing and creating learning environments for almost 20 years in higher education and in corporate settings. Much of her work has been creating learning experiences for remote learners. First, as a course developer and learning engineer with the Open Learning Initiative at Carnegie Mellon University, and currently at the cybersecurity company Proofpoint, where she applies what she's learned to technical training, technical certifications, new explorations into AI-assisted design, gamification, and learning motivation. I had the opportunity, if you all know my career, you know I used to work at Carnegie Mellon University too, and you're going to think that that's where I had the opportunity to really work with Renee, but that's not true. I met her later I think we ran into each other at Carnegie Mellon, but I met her at Proofpoint. So what I know is that she always strives to bring context, relevance, and fun to the learning experience. She enjoys the challenge of distilling complex information in easy to understand and digest content. So I'm excited to pick her brain today about how to connect with learners when they're remote and not, I think when it's remote, it poses additional challenges. So when they're not in front of you, that's what we're looking at today with Renee. Welcome, Renee, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So one of the things that we know is that the remote learning, one thing I need to point out before we get started with this is that we still believe, whether it's remote learning or in the classroom, that learners learn by doing. But in the remote learning environment, it actually poses some additional challenges for folks who are trying to create learning. So Renee, what are some of the things that you consider when you're designing e-learning that might be different from somebody who's designing for in-person training?
Well, you're right. I mean, the principles of learning aren't going to change, but you aren't going to have that learner in front of you. So you're not going to be able to see their facial expressions. You're not going to be able to have that quick conversation to check in to see where they are. So really, I like to start with, what are my goals for learning? What are their goals for learning? And then really try to think through that learning experience. Where do I think they're going to, where do I think they are, and how do they need to get there? So you have to really think through each and every step of your experience when you're designing it, because you're not going to be able to change it on the fly.
Interesting. So how do you figure out what, their side of it? Like you said, you're thinking about yours. I assume you're just tackling on experience that you've had and what you've learned doing this for 20 years, but how do you figure out what they want, need, and how you might address that when you're learning your remote learning?
So a lot of it's going to be really trying to understand your learner, get as much information as you can. So when you're developing a piece of learning, you really want to think about who's your audience, who's taking this course, who's taking this, watching this video. What are they learning for something in their career? Are they learning to get a degree? What is their why? And really trying to figure out what is going to be the best motivation at that point in their learning journey. So a lot of times it's doing as much research as you can ahead of time. And when we're working with our professional learners, we know that they want to either get a certification, or they want to do something in their career, or they want to be able to apply something right away because they have to do it for their job. So that part, we know as far as motivation, they're going to want to excel. They're going to want to apply. If you're in a different situation, just really trying to figure out, why are they taking this learning? Is it because their manager told them?
Right.
Your techniques are going to be different.
Yeah, a lot easier to do it if somebody's just checking a box, right? We can just throw it out there and say, you're not going to get anything from it anyways, right?
Well, there are things you can do to help motivate that unmotivated learner, but you need to know where they're coming in.
At Legacy Learning Consulting, we are radicals about using your organizational learning strategy to transform and grow your business. We focus on outcome-based strategies tailored to achieve your business goals. To get results, learners need to shift behaviors, Using learning research and our years of experience, we create and implement learning experiences that shift behaviors toward your organizational goals. Since your business is unique, your learning strategy should match your company's unique DNA. We get under the hood to understand your business needs and your learners, and then develop learning solutions that target your unique needs. We focus on creating tailored learning experiences that don't just teach, they shift behaviors and create measurable impact. Through immersive scenarios and interactive experiences, we bridge the gap between knowledge and action. Our solutions help learners apply what they've learned in practical ways that drive change where it matters most, on the job. With Legacy Learning Consulting, learning isn't just a box to check. It's a strategic investment in lasting behavioral change that directly impacts your organization's success. Ready to make the most out of your learning investment and get real, measurable results? Contact Legacy Learning Consulting today, and let's design a solution that transforms behaviors and drives success.
Yeah, one of the things we do is we actually create learner personas, and I think you're talking about that too. Is like, hey, there's sometimes we don't have it, we don't have the information, so we got to do like you said, a step back of like, okay, so why am I creating this thing, and what can I imagine that learner might need? And some of it's guesswork, but if you could actually meet with the learners, and that's how we usually develop our learner personas. We literally interview learners as part of our.
You have access to your learners. That's great. Absolutely.
Yeah. Not always there though.
Personas is a perfect way to do it.
Yep. So when you think about this, we've already talked about a little bit, like we're not in front of them when we're doing remote learning. And by the way, just so everybody's aware, when we're talking remote learning, we're actually talking more e-learning where it's like just static out in the world, rather than a virtual environment where we can engage with folks. But what are some of the challenges to keeping learners motivated? And, because we know that motivation is a big part of people's ability to actually learn. If I'm not motivated to do it, I can sit through the experience but not get anything out of it. So what are some of those challenges that you've seen that you need to overcome when you're creating remote learning?
There are a lot of challenges, especially with the attention span, decreasing over time. A lot of distractions in their environment and keeping that in mind. But being able to have something very targeted, being able to have something that requires them to engage at certain points can be helpful. So maybe it's a knowledge check. And even if they get it wrong, then they'll be like, oh, maybe I wasn't paying as much attention to what I was just looking at, right? Or an activity, or, even just fun little things. Like when you get something wrong, having like a wah, wah, instead of just a, you got this wrong. But really giving them immediate feedback in some way, meaningful feedback, also giving them meaningful choices. So being able to decide where to go from where they are, or being able to decide where to start, giving them more autonomy is a lot of that helps quite a bit with motivation.
Yeah. I think to do that too, it gets to your first point that you really understand who they are, right? Because in order to give them meaningful feedback. And that's one thing you see a lot is that instructional designers will create these quizzes or knowledge checks, but they didn't really think it through. So they literally just asking the question they just told the person, and then they're saying, hey, yeah, great job. It's not a great job. You just regurgitated what I said 2 minutes ago. That doesn't do anything. All that is doing is a checkpoint to make sure that they're still there, which is better than nothing. But I like what you said of making sure that it's meaningful. Like, if you think about a scenario and you're like making something that actually isn't clear, give some of the options that doesn't make it clear which one it is, but they have to think about something you just covered to be able to make that determination. And then when you get the feedback, you explain why that one was very valuable. Or in a previous podcast that we did, we talked about like what I think of as like the reverse learning, and asked somebody a question. We haven't given them any content, but we asked them a question. And then based on their response, we're going to give them the content that was relevant to what they selected, right? So I think that there's ways to overcome those challenges, but there's absolutely some challenges that are present. So I want to shift the conversation. We're kind of touching on motivation, but I want to shift it directly to that. So do you have any advice that you could give our audience to help them connect with learners and help motivate them throughout the remote learning process?
Motivation can be tricky. I think there's a lot of moving pieces to it, and to keep that in mind. Like, the learning principles don't change, of course, but the situation and where you are, there's lots of different things you can do. So like, there's intrinsic motivation, something that's just fun because it's fun, that the brain likes to do, right?
Yeah.
There's extrinsic motivation. You're doing it because you want that certificate, or you want to, collect something, or, somebody's giving you a t-shirt, whatever it is. And then there's also, if you know the Octalysis framework, there's also like white hat and black hat. So white hat is, they're long term. It makes you feel good, when you're doing something that is meaningful to you. For example, is white hat. So that'll last a long time. But black hat, it really creates urgency. So you wouldn't want to have a ton of either, because white hat is great because you can keep going and you can motivate people and they'll want to continue moving on. But without urgency, without going to that next module, without, or doing that next thing, you need to give them some sort of a trigger or an urgent, some sense of urgency to keep going. So having that mix of things is, I guess, what I'm getting at. It's, you want a mix of all of these different kinds of motivation. So you want to find out what really motivates your particular learner. Like, who is in this particular space? Are they really motivated by sharing this experience with colleagues or friends? Then you can build in more along the social pieces of elements in your learning experience. Are they motivated because this is what they really want to do with their life and they feel like they're part of something bigger? You can build in pieces that apply that. So yeah, as far as you can, try to create things that are more fun for people to do and will keep them going and will help them feel good about it.
Thank you for joining us. Join us next time for part 2 of this topic. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more ways to make your organization strong through your learning function.